Hey folks, welcome back. I'm your host, R.R. Slugger, and today we're taking a look at one of LEGO's strangest and most unreliable pieces of tech, the Micromotor. If you're coming into this video currently unfamiliar with this little device, I don't blame you. During its 8-year lifespan beginning in 1993, it was featured in less than a dozen sets. If we discount Mindstorm kits and service packs like these, we're actually left with only 5 releases. Of these 5, 2 were Technic-based sets and 3 were system-based. It's pretty unlikely that you had one of these growing up. I know I certainly didn't. As an adult, however, I've come to own this one, Set 6979 Interstellar Starfighter from the space subtheme UFO. This behemoth was released in 1997, and that little factoid is going to become relevant in a moment. Before we talk about why, let's examine the Micromotor in greater detail. First off, micro is right. This thing is tiny. With dimensions even smaller than that of the classic mailbox piece, it's kind of hard to believe there's a working motor inside this thing. With that being said, I'm not exactly seeing an on switch here. Truth be told, I'm not entirely sure I know how this thing works, but I know someone who does. I'd like to welcome Brian from the aptly named Battery Powered Bricks YouTube channel to show us the Micromotor in action.
Thanks, Slugger. The 9-volt Micromotor really is something quite unique, proving once again, good things can come in small packages. Unlike its older brother, it features internal gearing, which makes integrating into builds a snap. Just be careful when snapping those top and bottom clips. They are easily broken. In most LEGO sets of the era, it was often paired with a 9-volt battery box, which featured a button on the end that would lock into place and provide power to the partially metal studs on top. From there, the wires would... oh yeah, the wires. Most of the 9-volt wiring that LEGO produced used a rubber insulation that breaks down over time. I've often heard this is attributed to a fire-resistant chemical used in manufacturing. If your cables look like this, don't throw them away. They can be easily repaired without any special tools. I even know a guy that has made tutorials. If your wire has a shiny plastic insulation, you're most likely in the clear. With a good set of wires, we are finally able to power our motor. The output shaft, or stud in this case, turns at about 35 RPMs. It is most often paired with this pulley, which uses a rubber ring to provide some extra clutch power. Having such a small motor with internal gearing allows it to be used in some really tight spaces. This is my work in progress mock of a souped up Time Twister's train. The motor is tightly packed inside the boiler and provides some motion to the build. This was the only motor of its kind that LEGO ever produced, and it has certainly earned its place in history. I could go on, but for now let's head back over to Slugger to see that Interstellar Starfighter fly.
Thanks, Brian. Following his advice, I've set up my Micromotor with a battery box and cables so we can see what we can do with it. Power it on and, This is probably Brian's fault. In reality, it actually has more to do with the date I mentioned earlier, 1997. Micromotors were manufactured from 1993 to 2001, and even though they were only produced in red, somewhere along the line, something changed inside of them. In this fantastic archived Eurobricks forum, one of the Hungarian factory employees who actually worked where the Micromotors were designed and manufactured tells their story. Critically, the first batches were produced with a vacuum Schmelz magnet inside of them. This high-quality magnet has withstood the test of time, and most Micromotors that utilize it still function today. However, at some point in time, corners were cut and a cheaper to produce magnet was substituted in. These magnets have not been so lucky and have begun to crumble with age. Unfortunately, this spells nearly certain doom for every Micromotor after a certain year. 1997 seems to be a little too late in its life cycle. Adding yet another wrinkle to the micro madness, to my knowledge, there seems to be no way to visually discern a Micromotor with a vacuum Schmelz magnet to that of its cheaper counterpart. Micromotors are decidedly hard to service, given their tiny nature and atypical connections. Apparently, you're supposed to be able to get into them through these 4 small holes, but I just wasn't able to swing it. Even then, getting inside is only half the battle, as next you'd have to find a way to clean the magnetic debris and reassemble the contraption. After all that, you might be graced with a micromotor that might work for a while longer, before the magnet continues to degrade and you must repeat the whole process. Maybe if you repair clocks for a living, you'll have the tools to figure this out, but for a simple slug like me, I'd rather just buy a solution. But how? Well, I could just buy a motor that was tested to be working off of Bricklink, but that's no way to be certain. It could simply be a later, cheaper magnet-driven motor that hasn't degraded yet. It could go kaput within my possession or even within transit to me. As mentioned earlier, only the first batches of micromotors produced utilize the vacuum Schmelz magnet that we're after. That means we're looking for a micromotor from 1993, if possible. Again, to my knowledge, there's no way to visually discern the age of a used micromotor from the exterior alone, so naturally, we're looking for something that's sealed. I introduce to you Schrödinger's micromotor. From the exterior alone, there's no way to tell if this micromotor is alive or dead. It simply is. Sealed service packs like this one are certainly quite the rarity, and as such I had to order this one in from the States. A quick thank you to Dave's Brick Space for helping me out with this one. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to locate a sealed service pack from 1993, so I had to settle for this one from 1995. Hopefully that's still early enough to put us within the threshold. It's an expensive gamble, I'm not gonna lie, but this UFO set simply needs a micromotor to be worth reviewing. Sure hope this works. Yeah! Yeah! Woo! There's no doubt about it. This would have made you the coolest kid on the block in 1997. From the lights that illuminate the cockpit to the 8 fiber optic lines in the rear, the Interstellar Starfighter really feels like no expense was spared bringing it to fruition. This was a luxury item within the toy world back then, and the difficulty in acquiring working parts today ensures that it remains as such. While technically not the largest set in the UFO line when it comes to part count, the Interstellar Starfighter still feels like it's the flagship model, boasting the largest price tag to boot. $80 American for less than 300 pieces might not sound totally unreasonable, but once you adjust for inflation, you realize that's nearly twice as much today. This was surely an expensive toy. Yet, is it possible that the LEGO Group was actually losing money every time they sold one? For years, that has been the rumor surrounding any set that includes a micromotor, fiber optic system, or both. If my understanding is correct, Mark Stafford himself actually confirmed this in a Reddit post on the topic, going back through the company's bookkeeping years later. Even disregarding the 2 culprits here, the Interstellar Starfighter includes a number of premium features for the era. For example, did I mention that it has a working magnet system? 4 magnets secure this deployable craft to the rear section of the model in satisfying fashion. Unlike so many other detachable gimmicks that leave a model in shambles of its former self, the Interstellar Starfighter is a shining example of how to do this right, as both the secondary craft and the main model itself look great with or without each other's support. On the dome of this detachable ship rests another feature even more rare than the magnet system itself, a heat-sensitive sticker. These were all the rage in the 90s, yet remain quite the rarity in LEGO's repertoire. Of all the LEGO in my collection, only my UFO sets feature such a gimmick. Admittedly though, it's not all that impressive. Perhaps they've worn out over time, or perhaps they weren't that remarkable to begin with, I'm not sure. Beyond the lights and sounds, the Interstellar Starfighter also features two of perhaps the most notable facets of the UFO series. Firstly, these large quarter-dome saucer pieces. Developed specifically for the theme, these saucer pieces actually came in two sizes, big and bigger. When looking at the series as a whole, it's easy to see how the designers must have been exploring all the different ways they could incorporate this new element into their models. While I can certainly understand any disdain one might have for massive single pieces like these, I must admit that I found them a lot of fun to build with. Many modern sets can be tedious to construct, spending far too long using dozens of pieces to build up basic shapes. Sizable bricks like these might feel like cheating at times, but I think there's an argument to be made that it can actually be more difficult to use them effectively because of their size. These pieces naturally lead us to the second point UFO is most well known for: lavish, if not excessive printing. There are so many brand new printed elements that debuted with UFO, and nearly all of them were never seen again. Add to that the over-the-top level of detail on the minifigures themselves, and you've got one of the most profligate LEGO themes the company ever produced. I plan on discussing the rest of the series at a later date, but for now, let me just say that 6979 Interstellar Starfighter is an absolute triumph of LEGO space in the 90s. Getting one in working order, however, is sure to be a substantial challenge, as even buying one sealed does not guarantee the components will function. The curse of Schrödinger's micromotor lives on. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'd like to give an additional shout out to Battery Powered Bricks for helping me out with this one. Please go check out their channel, as they're one of the best content creators within their niche. Once again, this video was brought to you by the Summer of Slug, and my thanks go out to everyone who helped make it happen. If you want in on the party, check the link in the description. I've been your host, RR Slugger, and I'll see you next time for another video.